G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. It's the 26th of June 2013, it's 37 minutes past 7, and I think Julia Gillard is just about to become history as the ex-leader of the Parliamentary Labor Party, so she can't be the Prime Minister, and we're going to find out what happens.
And what the outcome would likely to be was always going to be difficult. You know, the pressure had been building for some time, and this is technically the last session that the Parliament could be held before Julia Gillard's election deadline could be met. So we suspected that if anything was going to happen, it would happen over the next couple of days.
Well, yeah, I suppose that had been building, but only a day or two that the Rudd camp had failed to sway any ministers. This was basically all off because they couldn't muster any numbers. Then Bill Shorten turns up today and changes his allegiance. There are a lot of surprises here. It's very fluid.
That's true. Although, of course, there had been some interesting press reportage about 2 or 3 weeks ago that Bill Shorten had gone from being part of Julia Gillard's circle of trusted advisors to reports that he was on the outer somewhat. So we had the first hints of a breakdown in the solidity of the Australian Workers' Union sub-faction support.
Well, he denied that, didn't he?
Well, indeed, yes, but he was denying that he was contemplating a change to Rudd as early as this morning, according to News Corporation newspapers.
Well, just hang on for a second there, Nick. I'm going to bring Annabelle Crabb in to join us in this conversation. ABC political behemoth, I'm going to call her. Annabelle, I imagine you're in Canberra at the moment, is that right?
You're very kind. No, I'm in Sydney at the moment.
Oh, you're in Sydney? Sorry
yeah, I'm on about 38,000 devices, including the one currently pressed to my ear, I'm using to communicate with you. If any of them gives out, it's not because I'm being rude, it's just because it's Sydney.
Yes, I can imagine, and your batteries are no doubt draining very, very quickly.
I'm wired to the power board, don't worry.
Yes, now you heard JuliaEctomy there explaining, you know, his reflections on this, that there was an expectation that this might happen. The shift,
yeah, a little bit. I mean,
the change in Bill Shorten's position, but I don't know if anyone expected it to be quite like this. Did you?
Well, it hasn't just about every possibility been exhaustively rehearsed over the last few weeks and months. I mean, there's been some major argument about what has been, you know, whether this is all a figment of the media's imagination or whether something is moving in the Labor caucus. I mean, I think there's a reasonably clear answer to that this evening. These sorts of things don't happen in politics according to a schedule or according to a formula. They're really difficult, wrenching human decisions that, I mean, I think we often depersonalise politics and assume that it's all kind of exoskeletal and a bit pincery, but actually it's quite a human business. And if you have a look at, for instance, even Bill Shorten making that announcement that he did this evening, which was a very significant one, it was pretty clear from looking at his face just how tricky that was for him.
Yeah, indeed. There is that sort of human drama to this. JuliaEctomy, I might come to you on that question. Do you think, how difficult do you think it's been? Is part of the reason this has been such a shambles in the way that we've reached this point? Is that really a reflection of just how difficult and heart-wrenching the process has been for a lot of the Labor caucus?
Well, yes, because we have to go back to the beginning of it all, which of course was back in 2010 when the factional conveners, or mainly the factional conveners of the right, indicated that they no longer were going to support Kevin Rudd, and Julia Gillard became Labor leader and Prime Minister thereafter. Ever since then, the leadership battle has been going on. It's waxed and waned over time. The bottom line in this, Wally, is that probably the majority of the caucus would prefer to have Julia Gillard as leader than Kevin Rudd. But the political reality is indicating an electoral reality that's coming through from the opinion polls, that if they stay with Julia Gillard, Labor will be decimated at the next election. There will be a decimation not only in the House of Reps, but I think there's also real fear that the coalition could get control of the Senate.
Well, and they'd be in such a position they wouldn't have a base to build from. But all of that raises the question, really, what the electoral consequence of this is going to be, and whether, if Kevin Rudd does emerge from this ballot victorious, he will be any more heroic when it comes to the election, which I suppose may not even be in September now. Annabelle, what are your thoughts on that? There'll be a honeymoon period. How long will it last?
I would expect that Kevin Rudd would go to the polls very quickly, and I think that would probably be a reasonably appropriate course of action, wouldn't it? I mean, it's probably around about time that the people of Australia were consulted on this whole business. I think that would be a respectable course of action. But as for the other important parts of this particular vote that's just going on or just finished going on now, I mean, there's a whole lot of policy areas where we don't really know what difference Kevin Rudd would make, how his campaign platform would be different from that which otherwise would have been taken to the people on September the 14th. I mean, we know that he's going to be stuck with the Skonsky reforms. I don't say stuck with in a kind of contemptuous way. I just think that the fact that they've just been legislated today probably is going to have some consequences. The aged care reforms went through the House about 30 seconds before it rose for the caucus to come and consider this question. I think the National Disability Insurance Scheme would probably need to stay, but what would Kevin Rudd, as a reappointed Prime Minister, do on asylum seekers? What would he do on the 457 visas? We think that he would make some changes to the carbon pricing regime. What would he do with the mining tax? Would he have another crack at that? I mean, it's all a bit up in the air on the basis that this contest between the two of them, Julia Gillard and Kevin Rudd, has been an intensely personal one, and it's been about the personalities and the hatreds and the tensions, and not really about differences in policy at all.
Right,
so
which is the clear difference between the Abbott-Turnbull leadership battle that Abbott...
Very much so.
Yes.
I mean, I think it's kind of revelatory that the first thing that Kevin Rudd said in justification for his change of position on the question of contesting leadership was, I am standing because otherwise I think we'll have Prime Minister Tony Abbott. And like when the opposition leader is your main reason for doing something, well, we've moved a fair way from the calm contemplation of policy differences and issues, haven't we?
Well, absolutely. But to be fair, the Labor Party's been wanting to talk about Tony Abbott quite a lot, and that's kind of the card that's trying to play. Nick, I might pick your brain on the policy questions, because we've spoken to you before about the carbon tax promise that was broken after Julia Gillard had to form minority government. She reached a deal with the Greens. You were very critical of her for breaking that promise. You said she didn't have to do it, but she did anyway, and that's undermined her, and she's really had to live with the consequences of that ever since. Kevin Rudd, of course, is not Julia Gillard. He didn't make that promise. He comes at this with something of a fresh slate, although there's been the carbon tax passed and it's now in. What do you think he does here?
Yes, I think that's a really interesting question. I agree with everything that Annabelle had said before. I think the only real point of difference between Gillard and Rudd on policy is actually on this climate change matter. Rudd, of course, was an emissions trading scheme advocate, and Gillard, after the election, because of the circumstances of the Parliament, where she had to get the support of the Greens, and critically, of course, Tony Windsor ended up backing the carbon tax, which I think has been... and two things I think have really hurt her all the way through her leadership. The first one are the circumstances in which she became leader and Prime Minister. I don't think the electorate's ever quite forgiven her for that. And the other one, of course, is this whole carbon tax thing. And I just think that one possibility for Rudd to try and give a sense that Labor is listening to the electorate. I mean, the whole reason why they're going to change leader, we're assuming, is because of what the opinion polls are indicating. And the other thing he might do is say, by the way, the carbon tax is off. And he'll be able to do that in a sense, because I do think that Annabelle's right too, that what Rudd will want to do is go to an election as quickly as he possibly can. Whether the Governor-General will let him do that, and the circumstances in which that might happen, I think that's actually an interesting constitutional problem, and it's going to be a fascinating day in the House of Reps tomorrow.
Well, can you just say the carbon tax is off like that? I mean, one of the whole issues surrounding Tony Abbott's impending Prime Ministership has been whether or not he would actually be able to unpick something the business has already moved in response to, that is already there. I mean, is Kevin Rudd any more capable of saying it's off than Tony Abbott?
That question is based on the assumption that at the moment the debate is rational. At the moment it's not. What's happening is everybody is just running around responding to what they think the electorate might want to hear. And the first stanza of it may well be the removal of Julia Gillard, and the second stanza may be, by the way, we're hearing what you're saying about climate change, we're going to rethink. Now, whether What they're going to do and how they're going to do it, that's a different matter. And the chances are, Wally, that they probably won't be there to do it anyway, because I don't think even the transition to Rudd is going to save Labor at the next election.
So it becomes about minimising damage. And of course, Rudd could very easily modify the carbon tax to an ETS, given that was his policy, and therefore not necessarily unpick it, and maybe not change very much at all, but call it something else, and then there's a different label, and so the politics around it changes, I suppose, as part of it.
That's right. Yeah. So, but I mean, that's all for later. At the moment, there's a deadline looming. There's going to have to be an election before September or October or November. I mean, it's an interesting question as to when's the latest Labor could go. But I think I heard in dispatches just recently that Rudd's talking about a late August election.
August 24,
makes sense. Yeah, because what they really want to do is they want to get going now. They don't want the electorate to sit around and be remote and give the opposition the opportunity to remind the electorate of all the reasons why Rudd's colleagues didn't like him in the first place and said all those horrible things about him when he was away overseas, when one of those leadership challenges started. So, yeah, he'll want to go to the polls as quickly as he possibly can. It remains to be seen what the Governor-General's attitude to that will be.
And, of course, then he avoids Yom Kippur and the Day of Atonement headlines. Not that would be his conceding. It seems via text messages to reporters that are staying outside the caucus room that Julia Gillard was going to lose that ballot. Kevin Rudd was going to emerge victorious, but we don't know. We haven't got an official result, so we're not going to tell you that there is one. Annabelle, I might come back to you. Gay marriage. Would that be something that...
Say, one of the reasons it's taken so long is there's actually a candidate this time. Like the last couple have been a bit slow, a bit quick, because you haven't had to work through all that irritating actual voting stuff.
I suppose, yes. I wonder if it means it's close.
It means that everybody is getting a vote. They tend to vote 2 by 2 in the Labor caucus, because nobody trusts each other. And also, this might be an occasion where the speeches from each candidate might be reasonably detailed, I would think. That's just a guess. But it's a pretty big decision, isn't it? So I guess they're taking their time making it.
Possibly so. No, I wanted to bring you to the question of same-sex marriage, because that's one very clear difference between the two. And indeed, when Kevin Rudd announced that he'd revised his position on that and was now supportive of it, there was a lot of commentary that suggested that this was a way to undermine Julia Gillard. We don't know whether or not that was true or how genuine it is, but nonetheless it remains a difference. Do you think Kevin Rudd, if he were to emerge victorious here, would put that on the agenda front and centre to try to change the whole atmospherics of the politics around him?
Well, it's already on the agenda as far as the Labor Party is gone. I mean, the Labor Party had a free vote on it. It's actually the coalition that maintained a binding vote on this. And that's something that Tony Abbott said that he and the party room will revisit after the next election. I think that's quite a significant development, this loosening of the line that a coalition is indefatigably against same-sex marriage. But what could Kevin Rudd do, really? I mean, in the one day of Parliament that would be remaining to him, I don't know. I mean, I guess he would campaign as a Labor Prime Minister that was pro-gay marriage, and I think that is a significant advance in itself.
Well, yeah, it would be about the rhetoric in the campaign. It wouldn't be about legislative reform at this point.
Yeah, sure. And, yes, obviously that would change. I mean, I think it kind of reflects the way that politicians have been changing on this issue in the last 3 years, which has been one of the most fascinating unfoldings of a new political direction that you could really name in this Parliament. I mean, it's really only a couple of years since the very idea that either political party would support or have a leadership candidate who supported same-sex marriage would have been absolutely laughable and unfeasible in the extreme. I think this is an example where community opinion has changed pretty quickly and politicians have changed with it.
My own personal opinion, for what it's worth, is the Labor Party made a savage mistake in replacing Kevin Rudd with Julia Gillard, because they should have just taken the electoral defeat. They should have taken the electoral defeat and let Tony Abbott make an absolute, total, utter, complete fucking mess of everything that he touched for 3 years. And right now, the entire electorate would be begging the Labor Party to come back and rescue them from the Liberal National fiasco. Because every state where the Liberals have taken power, they have basically tried to return to the 1950s in terms of national parks, civil rights, race relations, environmental protection, worker protection. They've literally stuffed everything they've touched. If Tony Abbott had have been Prime Minister for the last 3 years, everybody would be sick of him. That's what they should have done. As it is, Julia Gillard did a big backflip on the carbon tax, and she sounds like a bogan, and everybody's bloody sick of her.
It is Kevin Rudd, 57 votes, Julia Gillard, 45 votes.
Was there a spill for the deputy?
There's no spill for the deputy position.
Was there a deputy voted in?
I've just come from counting the leaders. I understand the deputy's making a statement at the moment, but I thought I'd come straight out and advise the media what the result is.
Who is the deputy? Will there be a new deputy tonight, and will you inform us later?
We'll wait and see what's happening there, but I've got to say that I've just come straight out of the meeting to advise you the result of the leadership.
Did Kevin Rudd speak before or after? Did Kevin Rudd or Julia Gillard speak before the vote, and did Julia Gillard speak after?
Both actually spoke before the vote. Julia Gillard moved the spill motion and spoke to it, and Kevin Rudd sought leave of the caucus and spoke prior to the vote as well.
Was there any discussion of the election date?
One at a time, okay.
Was there any discussion of the election date?
No, as we were solely there to conduct a ballot.
What was Julia Gillard's reaction?
After the vote?
Fran, when I left, Wayne Swan was addressing the meeting, but I came out to advise you of the...
What was Julia Gillard's reaction to the result?
I'm not in a position to advise the reaction. I came straight out.
Speak to the caucus tonight, Chris?
No.
Is Kevin Rudd heading to Government House tonight?
I'm not aware.
Chris, were there any cues?
The mood's quite sombre. I think most people are happy that the issue of leadership's now put behind so that the party can concentrate on preparing for the September election.
Have any ministers indicated they resign?
I've just come straight out from conducting the vote, so I'm not sure what else might be occurring in the party.
So there you have it. There you have it. It's now official. Kevin Rudd has defeated Julia Gillard in the Labor leadership ballot. 57 votes to 45. That's a margin of 12. It's a very big shift from what we'd seen previously. It is now official. We were expecting that would be the result. Those have been the murmurings for, well, probably about 45 to 50 minutes now. And it is now official. Kevin Rudd, the leader of the Parliamentary Labor Party, not yet Prime Minister. We don't even know if he'll make it to ever be Prime Minister because there's a whole lot to unfold tomorrow in the Parliament. Will he have the numbers in the lower?
Okay, there endeth part 2